ATP, what it do, what it do, what it do with your boy Clay More Rain back at you guys with another one, man. Salute to all my subscribers. Always got to start off giving you guys all the love. You guys are really helping this platform get to bigger and better things, man. So first and foremost, thank you guys for all the support you guys are giving to the channel. If this is your first time tapping into the content, I do invite you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit your bell icons as well, so you are getting alerts when all this content is dropping. So look, guys, this is my morning after, right? Been up all yesterday, went to work at like 4:30. Well, woke up at 4:30, went to work about like almost 6. And then got home and got it together and got ready for a fight night, right? Last night, Keyshawn Davis and Dennis Baranchek, main event for the WBO Lightweight Championship, headline that card in Madison Square Garden in New York, and of course a great undercard to go with it. So it's the morning after. All the fights are in the books, right, guys? All the fights are in the books, and it's time to go ahead and assess what we saw last night, and let's talk a little bit about what we should be expecting to see next. So look, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I didn't catch a Nico Ali Walsh fight. We all know great legendary boxer, may rest in peace, Muhammad Ali's grandson, and Nico Ali Walsh has been on the scene now for a little while now, playing on a prospect level. Started off with a real bang, coming in really representing, I guess you could say, his legacy of sorts as far as his grandfather's concerned and what to expect from him. People had a lot of great expectations for him. He showed a lot of promise early, but he does seem to be kind of like leveling out a little bit, dealing with transitioning and seeing that talent that he had at the prospect space translate into the contender space, and looks like he's having a little bit of a hard time getting that done. Nico Ali Walsh does take a split decision loss in this fight, has to go back to the drawing board and kind of see where he's going to be at. Really don't got a lot to share on him. Don't want to say anything negative about him. I wish him the best. We'll see what he does if he's able to bite down, really show some grit, revisit maybe some fundamentals, and come back into the sport better than what he left last night. Let's hope he benefits off that. Followed up with that fight was Jared Anderson. Jared Anderson, once again, Jared Anderson is a story within himself, right? Up and coming heavyweight, from prospect going into contendering. They thought that this kid was going to be the next wave for American heavyweight boxing. The American scene when it comes to heavyweight boxing has been, quiet, a little bit lackluster to say the least. Jared Anderson seemed to be the one that was going to be leading the way that way, brought that athleticism, brought the youth, and everybody loves heavyweights who can knock people out, but it does seem as his career was moving forward, it wasn't so much of his abilities that were limited that got in front of Jared Anderson. It was his mentality, right? Mental strength and grit, which all these fighters have to at some point face, right? It's always a point in time when adversity becomes an issue. Boxing is all about adversity. You're dealing with opponents who are trying to beat you, who are training in their own rights, or trying to make names for themselves. And every fighter has to face adversity. So Jared Anderson seemed to be dealing with that adversity in an adverse way, right? Not embracing it, but in all reality, seeming like he was uncomfortable with it and didn't want to deal with it. But as a lot of boxers do in this space, they come in with a lot of baggage, a lot of weight on their shoulders, a lot of responsibility, coming from humble beginnings, low income, coming from poverty, coming from that type of lifestyle. You have a lot of people who are depending on you, right? A lot of times you're the one who's going to lead the way and change your whole entire family trajectory as far as where they're coming from. And Jared Anderson never seemed to have actually dealt with that kind of responsibility well, wanted to be more of a kid, wanted to be more, felt like he missed out a little bit on his youth. And I could imagine a lot of people are depending on him to be successful. And that always seemed to be a big mental blockage for Jared Anderson. You guys saw the interview. If you didn't, you can go back when Jared Anderson was actually getting ready to fight, I believe Charles Martin, don't quote me, but Roy Jones and Jared Anderson had a conversation where we saw Jared Anderson kind of get into his emotions, just crying. And Roy Jones trying to bring him back, of course, as Jared Anderson was trying to explain that he didn't ask for this, that this wasn't what he wanted to do. He didn't want to have to do all these things. He just wants to be Jared. He just wants to be young. He just wants to be without I don't want to say accountability, but I guess without the expectations, right? That'll probably be the best way to describe Jared Anderson's situation. Well, listen, man, he was moving forward. He told the world he wasn't really caring about championships, was just in there for the money, wanted to retire about around the age of 26. I believe he said he wanted to be done with the sport. Look, Jared Anderson went into this fight last night, 25 years old, right? And listen, true to his own words, went into this fight not motivated, uninterested, not really excited, no passion. To me, it looked like he was out of shape. This coming off, of course, his biggest payday, his biggest show, when Turki Al Sheikh brought Riyadh Season to Los Angeles, California, as he had Terrence Crawford fighting Ismail Madrimov for that 154-pound WBA title and WBO interim title. And Jared Anderson on that card fighting the up-and-coming Martin Bakole, who was really unknown to the heavyweight boxing space, more so known to be in the background for getting heavyweight fighters ready. Martin Bakole coming out of Congo in Africa. But if you watch his, if you did any type of film study on him or you did any type of research on him, this was definitely going to be Jared Anderson's biggest opponent, biggest obstacle he's ever gone through. Real adversity was standing in front of him, and it was going to be a fight where he got to really separate himself from the regular heavyweight division as far as the prospects were concerned, and bring him in to the heavyweight division as an actual contender. When you're talking about the fighters in the conversations like Daniel Dubois or Joseph Parker or Zele Zhang or Philip Ergovich, right? This is where Turki Al Sheikh wanted to see if Jared Anderson was going to be able to compete, and Martin Bakole was going to be that litmus test. Well, Jared Anderson lost that fight, ultimately got stopped and knocked down multiple times. He was getting hit a lot like he has in the past, and Martin Bakole was just able to weather through Jared Anderson's shots that he were landing, and he was somewhat successful offensively as far as landing those combinations and hitting Martin Bakole with everything he had. But as any real heavyweight does face at some point in time, no matter how much of a puncher that you are, there's always a bigger puncher, potentially, at least. And every heavyweight in their own right can cause a lot of damage to you, and he just fell short in that fight. This was supposed to be his comeback return fight. If you were going into this fight looking to see some things from Jared Anderson, you're probably trying to see how did that age with Jared Anderson, the defeat he had with Martin Bakole. Well, guys, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be honest with you. It doesn't look like it aged well at all. Look like Jared Anderson may have been sitting on his couch for the whole entire time since the Martin Bakole fight to this fight. He did make a big payday. I believe I heard he made north of $1 million, close to $2 million off that fight with Martin Bakole. So it seems like he's just kind of been out of boxing mentally, physically. He was looking out of shape and, operated the same way fighting against a Mario Calais, I believe his name was, from out of Greece. This guy was just, was supposed to be a layup for Jared Anderson, an opportunity for Jared Anderson to show out and start to get those fans behind him again, start to get that faith of the American boxing fan as far as him being the future of the heavyweight boxing scene. And he fell short, man. Just, feet were in the cement, wasn't moving around well, wasn't receiving the instructions from his corner well, seemed to not really be present in the moment. Mario Calais' pants were literally falling off of him as he was going through the rounds. Also, just Mario able to successfully land a lot of clean left shots and a lot of shots that Jared Anderson should, at this point in his career, shouldn't be getting hit with, right? It was just really a lackluster performance. Jared Anderson didn't win the fight. I don't know if it was a unanimous or a split decision. I can't remember off the top of my head, but ultimately nobody really cared, right? He walked out of the ring very disinterested, very discouraged, looked a little frustrated, had a very matter-of-fact approach and attitude about the result and about boxing in general, just didn't want to be there. I'll say that, and I'll end it like this on Jared Anderson. If Jared doesn't really want to be in the boxing game, one thing about boxing is you hear it, and you'll hear it, and you'll hear it over again. You don't play this sport. This is not a sport you play. This is not a game. People in there losing their lives, people in there being changed, even if you don't lose your life, losing quality of life. So many negative and conflicting things can come on the back end of a bad boxing career. Jared Anderson, being 25 years old, needs to take that in consideration. I don't think it matters who he gets as far as trainers or adjustments he makes in his team. This is not what the situation is with Jared Anderson. The biggest thing Jared Anderson has to face is that man in the mirror. He has to discuss with himself, with people who he trusts, and really figure out how he's going to approach this sport, if he's going to approach it at all. At this point, myself, I'm not too optimistic about what Jared Anderson is going to do in boxing. But we'll see. Things can change. We'll see what he does, see how he deals with it, and we'll see what Top Rank has planned for Jared Anderson after this event here. Now, listen, after Jared Anderson, we had a young killer in Keon Davis. Yes, the last name is not by coincidence. This is the young brother of headliner Keyshawn Davis. Keon Davis steps into the ring. Who is Keon Davis fighting again? I mean, obviously a prospect, his second professional fight. Keon Davis, let's see here, against an Ira Johnson, right? Listen, Keon Davis in his last performance, you guys saw it. It was a great performance, but you saw that he was definitely acclimating at the 147-pound division, really not wanting to make any mistakes. Fought a little safe, but still let his hands go. But I think he realized something about himself in that fight, just like a lot of pundits, pugilists across the space. Or you can do more. Keon, you can do more. You're really one of the bigger threats as far as prospects are concerned in the 147-pound division. I can see this kid going up and fighting it at 154-pound, maybe even 160 pounds. He's 6'3". You know, he looks like he's going to fill out well, and he's a young kid. Listen, he went in there with Ira and did not play with his food, did as he should do, operating off of capitalizing off the momentum that his brother has made for his family, him and Kelvin and Keyshawn, being that Keyshawn is now fighting for a WBO title on this card. Keon taking advantage of that and saying, listen, I got to show out. I've got to show everybody that I'm really one of them, that it runs in the blood. You guys are looking at Keyshawn. You should look at all of us because we all bringing in that same intangible, right? Exciting fighting. And that's what he did. Made waste of Ira Johnson very quickly, attacking the body. And I love that when I see prospects step into the game that way. It shows poise. It takes a lot of patience to sit there, attack the body like Keon did, not to go crazy, hooking off on this guy, which he probably could have done as well. But listen, took his time, dissected the situation and the problem that was in front of him in Ira Johnson, and dismantled and solved the problem as quickly as possible. Stopped Ira Johnson. Great things for this kid, Keon Davis. Looking forward to see his next fight. Obviously, must-see boxing when you're talking about the family of the Davises, or as they say, DB3, the businessmen. Showing that, listen, man, we're all bringing in different parts of this game, but one thing that you can count from these guys is that it's going to be exciting boxing, must-see boxing, and they're continuing to go ahead and live to that lane, right? And it's aging well, the Davis family name, right? Moving on from Keon, we went into a welterweight in Rohan Polanco. Now, listen, guys, Rohan Polanco is a fighter coming out of the Dominican Republic. You know, down there, you know, when you think about him, you think about De Los Santos, you think about, I was saying De Los Santos. Who else do you think about as far as Dominicans? I don't know. I'm having a brain fart, right? But great fighters coming out of the Dominican Republic. Elvis Rodriguez, right? There's another one. But great fighters coming out of there. And Rohan Polanco, listen, making his country look great. This guy, to me, I know it might sound crazy to some people. He really gives me a lot of James Toney-ish type energy, right? The way he's able to sit there in that shell, you know, really not give up any ground, not going backwards, standing inside in that mid-range and causing a lot of problems in there with those short punches, able to catch punches, pull counter, a lot of damage being done there. And while he's in there, because of the way he's standing there flat-footed, able to generate a lot of power in between a little bit of space. So keeping that defense, but at the same time, ultimately on his counter punching, being able to make the opponents pay the ultimate cost. And he was able to make waste of a Jean Carlos Torres last night. And listen, his last fight that he had as well, Rohan showed out very similar. This one right here, Mr. Torres had to go ahead and do the no mas, take the knee and not get up. Didn't get knocked out physically, but got broken down physically to where he didn't want to continue anymore. And as long as Rohan Polanco is putting out performances like that, stopping these fighters that way, you got to think that it's only a matter of time before he gets in there with a top 10 fighter. I think right now, as of yesterday, he was number 13 in the WBO rankings. I'd have to think today, I wouldn't be shocked at all. Matter of fact, let's take a look at where he might be, right? Let's see here. I think it is going to be interesting to see Rohan Polanco's journey here. Let's Let's see here. Trying to just pull up the rankings here. Let's see here. All right, let's go with the rankings. Boom. Let's see. Computer's running slow this morning, guys. Ugh. Right. I know last I saw he was number 13 in the WBO rankings. I wouldn't be shocked if he's higher in the WBO rankings. I never saw really if he was ranked in the other sanctioning bodies as far as the WBC, the IBF, and the WBA rankings are concerned. But it's only a matter of time before he gets into the conversation. And it looks like he's going to be at a minimum a great dancing partner for a lot of welterweights in the division. Excited to see what Rohan Polanco has planned next. Yeah, I think this website is just making me look bad here on this video, right? It is what it is. Rohan Polanco, take a look at him. Dominican fighter making a lot of waves here. Why is this thing doing this? It used to be so dependable. Really used to be so dependable. Now you're just kind of right. Let me see. It is what it is. Rohan Polanco, we'll keep an eye on him in the welterweight division and looking to see a lot of great things from him. I don't, as far as his next matchup, what would it be? I could only imagine. I also don't think people are going to be looking forward to fight Rohan Polanco. He's one of those high risk, low reward fighters at this point. So I don't expect people to just be putting their titles up against this guy or putting their position in the rankings up against this guy for any reason. Probably gonna have to force these fights going forward. He really is just a talented young fighter, man. So we'll see what he does. Now, after Rohan Polanco, we walk into up and coming middleweight fighter in Vito Mielnicki Jr. Right? Vito Mielnicki Jr. coming out of New Jersey. This kid is under the radar, but really moving well and navigating through the middleweight division. When you look at the middleweight division right now, it's wide open for somebody to be an actual star in that division, right? I mean, what do we have here? We have Janabek, I believe, as a unified champion in that division. Obviously, we have Carlos Adames in that division holding the WBC title. And then I believe we have Erislandy Lara holding a WBA title in that division. So nobody's quite taking the division yet, right? If you would say who was the big star or the biggest threat or the number one guy in that division right now, you probably have to lean towards Janabek. But of course, you have up and coming fighters like Shiraz let me see here. Let's look at the middleweight division. And look, of course, this thing finally comes up. But let's look at the middleweight division here. You're looking here at, let's see here. It's amazing. It's really amazing. Let's check it out right here. Yeah, this website is running so slow today. It's actually a little bit frustrating that while I'm trying to record this video, this thing is finding a hard time navigating through its own servers. It is what it is, though, right? You got to be patient. We got to work with it and deal with it for what it is. So you have up and coming fighters in the middleweight division like Hamza Shiraz, who's going to be competing, I believe, against a Carlos Adames to challenge him for his WBC title. You have Erislandy Lara, who's, let's be honest, just aged. You know what I mean? An older fighter. He's still there, doing what he does. But then, of course, you got your Chris Eubank Jr.'s, and you have your Janabeks. You have your Troy Isleys that are coming up in there. Even Shane Mosley Jr. is in that division trying to make noise. You got a lot of fighters up and coming, but nobody's actually taken a spot yet. Vito Mielnicki Jr. is not yet ranked really in the rankings, but there's room for him to fight the right fights and to make his way there, fighting some big fights and being a big star at the 160-pound weight class division. Well, he had his run in with Connor Coyle last night, an Irishman, and these are one of those fights. It ended in a draw, right? The fight ended in a draw, amazingly enough, but don't let that draw fool you. This had a lot of Arturo Gatti, Mickey Wardish energy about this fight. Real competitive, a fight for Vito Mielnicki, which I think is going to be priceless as far as how valuable it's going to be to him in his career that he went through this. I am expecting probably a rematch, probably an anticipated rematch at this point. Anybody who saw this fight has got to be looking forward to see these guys go ahead and square up again and see them get it ironed out about who's the best. Conor Coyle was able to bring in that pedigree, that European style boxing, standing and doing everything behind the jab, letting combinations go, working on the inside well, was able to connect with Vito Mielnicki a couple of times on the inside. But ultimately, I'll be honest with you, Vito Mielnicki, to me, I thought won the fight. That's where I was at with it. Thought he did well, stat on the jab, committed to the body, really stabbing Conor Coyle to the body the whole entire fight, controlling the direction of the fight as far as I'm concerned. Always look like the predator in the fight, and Conor Coyle trying to survive. But, Conor Coyle doing okay, having moments when he got in trouble where you thought that maybe Vito was going to be able to go ahead and get him out of there or at least knock him down. But Conor Coyle showing that Irish spirit, that Irish strength that they always show. The Irishmen are known to have this, just really have that grit to sit there, bite down, and weather these storms. And Conor Coyle was able to do that. But Vito, being a young fighter, this benefits him. 12 or 10 great rounds with Conor Coyle. A lot of good quality boxing going on in there. And you have to think that on the back end of this fight, Vito Mielnicki walked away a better fighter because of it. And in the rematch, he'll probably share another 12 rounds. And if he's able to dispatch of Conor Coyle, it'll speak a lot on Vito Mielnicki. It really will speak a lot on him and what he does. I have the zone undercard playing right here. Yeah, this is looking interesting over here. All right, guys, bear with me. So much boxing going on. Yesterday was just Friday. Today we got a lot of boxing going on. Obviously, we have this DAZN card that's coming together, and then we also have a Golden Boy card going together a little bit later today with Oscar Duarte and Miguel Medueno going at it, man. Just nonstop boxing. So bear with me as I try to stay focused here on the topic at hand, but at the same time trying to tune out this great boxing going on over here on these prelims on this DAZN card coming out of Manchester in England, right? So, but yeah, Vito Mielnicki looking promising, looking forward to see this rematch. More than likely, I would think that would be what they want to do with him. This fight would put him in a real good spot. I mean, Conor Coyle ranked, I believe, number 3 in the WBA rankings. Let's see here where Vito at. Vito in the sanctioning bodies for the WBO at number 10. Let's see where he's at with the IBF. Not there yet. Let's see with the WBC. Where are you at, Vito? You're not here either. And of course, with the WBA, don't see him there. Yeah, like I said, man, he has an opportunity to make some moves here. A lot of up-and-coming middleweights, though. I mean, even when you think about a Keon Davis or an Elijah Garcia, these names that you see here, Bruno Saras making somewhat of a name at a super middleweight division right now, but he can, anytime he wants to be in the middleweight division, making smoke right now, especially after stopping Jaime Munguia. Shane Mosley Jr., as I mentioned a little bit earlier. You just got a lot of good names, but at the end of the day, nobody's actually taking the lead spot here at 160 pounds. Vito Mielnicki will make a great dance partner for a lot of fighters here. He just needs to continue to make his bones in the division and fight fighters like a Conor Coyle, be able to get that victory on Conor Coyle, and the rematch will do a lot for Vito Mielnicki. So we'll keep an eye on him. A great fighter, man, a great fighter, quality middleweight fighter. Moving on from Vito Mielnicki, we go into the main card, right? We go into the main card and we see, was Vito the beginning of the main card? I believe Vito wasn't the beginning of the main card. So let's go into the co-main event, right? Well, no, actually, sorry. We're going into the main card, of course, with Abdullah Mason. How could I forget Abdullah Mason? How could I forget Abdullah Mason? Man, Abdullah Mason coming off of listen, man, this kid is last year had one of the prospect of the year last year, as far as I'm concerned. I know Ring Magazine put Moses Atuma as prospect of the year, and I can understand, right? The heavyweight division is the supreme ultimate division in boxing, and Moses Atuma has hit that division like a train, right? Just really just derailing a lot of people's ideas of who is going to be the next up in the heavyweight division, as Moses Atuma kind of came out of nowhere, this young guy, and just shook up the whole heavyweight division. But as far as the lightweight division is concerned, and as far as the talent coming out of nowhere as well, and Abdullah Mason coming out of Ohio, this kid hit the ground running, dispatching everybody who gets in front of him. I believe his record now is 17 wins with 15 knockouts. I mean, this kid is doing it all, checking a lot of boxes. But in his last fight against Rohan Vasquez, we saw what people might consider chinks in the armor of Abdullah Mason. And the fact that Rohan Vasquez was able to put Abdullah Mason down twice in that fight. And really based on Abdullah Mason's maturity in the game and his experience in the game, being a little overzealous, kind of being lulled into drinking his own Kool-Aid about how much of an unstoppable force he is, got a little bit defensively irresponsible in that fight with Rohan Vasquez and got put down twice in that fight. But listen, man, let's not make more of it than what it's supposed to be, because at the end of the day, he did ultimately end up stopping Rohan Vasquez. He got up from the shots, came back, bit down, and fought even harder, and ultimately was able to get rid of Rohan Vasquez. That speaks to his grit. That speaks to his mentality, to his character. Those are all good things, but still, as these young fighters are growing and heading into the contender spot, you start to look at them and you can't do nothing. You can't help but compare them to the top level fighters in the division, as far as an Abdullah Mason is concerned, who you're talking about being prospect of the year. So every time you watch Abdullah Mason perform in the ring, you think about what he looks like in front of a Tank Davis. You wonder what he would look like in front of a Keyshawn, in front of a Shakur, against a Vasily, a Raymond Mortala, even a Tevin Farmer or William Zepeda, or even an Andy Cruz, who in his own right is a prospect. You automatically compare him to the other fighters you look to make their mark in the division. And he showed these chinks in his armor, and you started to say to yourself, what is he going to do about this? How's he going to work on this? How is he going to fix this? Going into this fight that he went into last night with a Manuel Jaime, this guy was a guy who has a fighter in Rolly Romero that he fought. And Rolly Romero, to me, I've never really been impressed with him. But listen, this is a champion at 140, at 140 pounds, a champion at 135 who fought Gervonta Tank Davis. He has opponents that, at the end of the day, you have to give Rolly Romero his respect as far as being a contender and being, what some people might consider tried true for him to make it to the point to even get into these fights. So Abdullah Mason getting an opportunity to share an opponent with Rolly Romero like Manuel Jaime was an opportunity for him to keep on moving and hopefully get himself one step closer to becoming a contender and, the ultimate goal of getting himself a title. Abdullah Mason had a great performance last night. I got to be honest with you, right? Took his time. He showed poise. He got real cerebral in the ring. You'd have to think that he probably could have gotten Manuel Jaime out of there a lot earlier than he did. And he took his time to break him down. But still, at times, seemed to trade with Manuel Jaime maybe more than he should have, right? And Abdullah Mason starting to give a lot of Jerome Boots Ennis energy. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, right? Because Jerome Boots Ennis is a great fighter. Once again, undefeated, very similar to Abdullah Mason. He may have his last two performances look like he got hit a little bit too much, but he ultimately won those fights. And it's crazy because when these fighters are projected to do so many great things, even in victories, people start to dissect those victories and kind of give losses inside the victory. And that's what kind of is happening with Abdullah Mason right now. There's a lot of expectations on him, but comparing him to the top echelon of the division, you start seeing things. And you got to think that he's going to work on those things and get better. But I think the bigger question for Abdullah Mason and a lot of these young fighters, very similar to Jared Anderson, is going to be his mental strength. Thus far, he's shown to be a very strong, mentally strong fighter, right? He does. But he has a lot of pressure on him. You can see it. I can see it, I would say, that he is and seems to be the route to financial freedom for his family, for him and his brothers, his father, his grandmother, his family. And he takes it and he puts it on his shoulders and, it causes pressure, but pressure makes diamonds. But on the other side, pressure can also bust pipes. There were moments in the fight where in the corner, you saw Abdullah Mason kind of like focus on the things he wasn't doing or the things he was wondering if he was doing well in the fight. But when you have that kind of family around you and that type of support system around you, it makes me optimistic about this kid's future. As a father was always able to reel him back, bring him back and let him know everything is going okay. Breathe. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You got this guy where you need to have him. This is a marathon, not a journey. Let's win this fight. You're doing well. Don't focus on the negative things. Getting him through that. You even saw there was an actual moment as Abdullah Mason's hand was being raised in victory. He just didn't seem as excited as you would expect somebody in his position to be. Seemed like he had a lot of bit of criticism on his performance, just a little bit maybe mentally to himself, as Abdullah Mason's father was able to grab him, bring him close, and speak some positive words into his ears. It looked like it was about 15 to 20 seconds worth of conversating that Abdullah Mason was just hearing his father just go ahead and speak great words, speak victory, speak a proudness that maybe he needed here in that moment. You saw Abdullah Mason kind of smile and just kind of exhale and let that moment go, and just became very present in the fact that he just got another victory, and he was that much closer to actually getting towards reaching his dreams, which I'm assuming is legacy driven as far as championships. But also, you got to think a little bit has to be the prize fighter in him that wants to put himself in the best position possible to go ahead and take care of his family. So Abdullah Mason looks like he has a bright future ahead of him. He's going to receive criticism. I'm hearing the criticism. Yesterday we had a great live, and listen, the panel we had up there was a great panel, and people spoke their minds and said, listen, man, Abdullah's okay, but he still looks, I can see this fighter beating him, and this fighter beating him, and this fighter beating him. And ultimately it comes down, and we spoke about it, to matchmaking. It comes down to the fighter's development process. The matchmakers at Top Rank are second to none. They've really earned the right to be, in my opinion, the #1 promotional company when it comes to developing their fighters. It's going to be about exposing Abdullah Mason to the right kind of fights that are going to help him develop in the right direction. We've already seen that he has the ability to knock out anybody who's in front of him, especially if you're flat-footed and you're coming forward. That's right up Abdullah Mason's alley. But how does he do against the boxer, right? The cerebral boxer who's not going to stand there in front of him, who's going to move around the ring? Is he going to be able to cut the ring off? Is he going to be able to deal with the different angles that are going to come at him? And people are complaining and speaking on Abdullah Mason's stance being just a little too wide, kind of preventing him from moving the way he needs to move when he's fighting against the right fighter. Very similar to Jaron Boots Ennis, who's getting in ridicule for the same exact thing. But look, we're talking about undefeated fighters, and we're talking about comparing these fighters to the best in their division and the best in boxing. And that alone is a compliment within itself, right? So let's see what happens with Abdullah Mason. Coming off that victory, ultimately ended up stopping Emmanuel Ami last night. He had a very active year last year. You got to think this year is going to be close to about the same thing. Fought 6 times last year. Let's see how busy Top Rank can keep Abdullah Mason this year. Let's see who they line him up against, and let's see, maybe at the end of 2025 or early 2026, we might expect to see Abdullah Mason in a title shot. Who knows? Moving on from Abdullah Mason, we go into the co-main event of the evening, which was Xander Zayas against Slava Spolmer. Now, Xander Zayas at 154 pounds. Listen, man, this kid we've watched growing up right in front of our eyes, right? Xander Zayas becoming a professional, I believe, around the age of 18 or so, becoming a professional, but been signed to Top Rank ever since he was 15, 16 years old. So this kid has been developed with the media, developed in the best gyms with the best sparring partners. His father, another one of those fathers who sacrificed a lot to put his son into position. And, Xander Zayas is soaking up game as he moves on in the game, and has a very mature, older energy about him, right? All around him. Very similar to Abdullah Mason, to be honest with you, as far as that as well, because Abdullah Mason also brings that maturity about him, the way he speaks, the way he carries the responsibility and accountability that he's putting on his shoulders for his family well-being. Very similar to Xander Zayas, who's looking to go ahead and shake up the 154-pound weight class division. A few months ago, Xander Zayas had an opportunity. There were conversations out there about him fighting Virgil Ortiz, as Jaron Boots Ennis pulled out of negotiations with Virgil Ortiz to go ahead and stay at 147 pounds. Virgil Ortiz was looking for a replacement, and Xander Zayas was right there in the conversation. What happened? Why that didn't come together? I have no idea. But as I told you guys earlier, Top Rank has been known as one of the best promotional companies when it comes to developing these fighters. So one might argue that, there were maybe questions that, as good as Xander Zayas was, as many boxes as he was checking, as much as the eye test told us about Xander Zayas, that he just didn't get in the ring with the right fighters yet for us to be able to pull the trigger as to where we were going to place Xander Zayas as far as the conversation was in 154 pounds. Well, Xander had a challenger last night, an undefeated Eastern European in Slava Spolmer, who brought a lot of intangibles that a lot of people wanted to see what Xander Zayas would do with once he got in the ring with him. Now, Xander Zayas has grown into this division, right? When he came in, you saw him as a child. You look at him today, you see him as a man. You've seen him fill out. You've seen him mature. You see his body changing, and you're seeing him taking the time to translate what he learned as a youth, not only fundamentally as far as boxing, but also allowing that those physical attributes that he's getting as he's growing up to be able to implement and deal with those things, right? Well, last night was going to be the ultimate test, and one might say Xander Zayas passed the test with flying colors. As Xander Zayas was the bigger fighter clearly in the fight, but one might say the more athletic fighter, the slicker fighter, the fighter with the better footwork. His punch placement was amazing. The way he was able to take advantage of a spomer. His jab was probably highlighted as the best punch of the night, as he was level changing with the jab, hitting him up in the head, coming down, level changing to the body. He was able to get underneath Slava Spomer's right hook. As he got under the hook, he was able to go ahead and switch out to the left and was able to take advantage of a lot of clean body punching last night. I mean, it was a body punching masterclass last night from Xander Zayas, ultimately being able to stop Slava Spomer. And that was going to be an important thing, right? But what do we see with Xander Zayas moving forward off the back end of a victory like this? Well, the power hasn't translated as well as I think he might want, or you might want. You'd have to think if Xander Zayas' power would go up just a few levels, a couple of notches, that he would become a real threat for everybody. But regardless, as far as the pedigree is concerned, as far as the cerebral activity, and even moments in time when he got clipped by Spomer, the way he dealt with it, this kid is the goods. And I want to see what he does next. Listen, he comes off this victory now. There are no more games for Xander Zayas. He's got to be looking forward. He's calling out the likes of a Sebastian Fundora. He believes that's his destiny, to go ahead and fight him and become a unified champion at 154. Really ready for any kind of smoke at 154 pounds. When you're looking ahead of him, you're looking at Israel Madrimov, you're looking at Virgil Ortiz, you're looking at Serhiy Bohachuk. There are a lot of fighters in between him right now and Sebastian Fundora. You guys know, if you don't, you can see my videos announcing that this announcement was fully made, that Sebastian Fundora next month will be fighting against Chordell Booker, defending his unified title. First fight since his victory on Tim Tszyu last year. Sebastian Fundora has been on the shelf, to say the least, kind of waiting on things to develop as far as matchmaking was concerned. Now he's going to be active. Xander Zayas, next week we're looking at one of the biggest boxing events going down in boxing. People are saying the card of the century, right? That's what the whole entire narrative is being pushed behind this card. But we'll see Ismail Madrimov on that card fighting against Virgil Ortiz. I wouldn't be shocked to see Xander Zayas out there in Riyadh, man, right? And because a lot of what happens on that card next week is going to make a big difference in where he moves on in his career. Serhiy Bohachuk coming off of a very competitive fight. Well, not a competitive fight, with Ishmael Davis, putting him away. But the fight before that against Virgil Ortiz, a lot of people thought Serhiy Bohachuk won that fight. Close split decision. Virgil Ortiz walks away with the victory, walking away as well with that WBC interim title. That happens to be the same path it seems like Xander Zayas is taking. Or no, I might be wrong. Xander Zayas might be taking the WBO route. But either way, Sebastian Fundora has both of those belts. So Xander Zayas is probably going to be sitting back patiently, watching to see what happens and develops in those fights. And then we have to see what his next fight is going to be. We have to see if Bob Arum is going to bet on Xander Zayas at this point. Does he think that the young phenom, some might consider, is ready for the big show at 154 pounds? Rumors going around, they'd like to see him against Charles Conwell. One might have to say that Xander Zayas being ahead of Charles Conwell, would it make sense to gamble with Xander Zayas' future at this point? He's earned the right to be in the big fights for the big paydays, and also, for legacy, to get after a title. Charles Conwell kind of in that race, probably close to in the same spot as Xander Zayas. I think fantasy-wise, that'd be a great fight. But in all actuality, I think Xander would have to, Xander's team would have to take second thoughts as to whether or not that would make sense. You would think they want to move forward and take advantage of whatever title contention they can get into, which like I said earlier, I think that lines up with the results next week between Ismail Madrimov and Virgil Ortiz, and also obviously what Sebastian Fundora is going to be doing against Chordell Booker next month. But great things for Xander Zayas. I think he checked a lot of boxes. And look, at the end of the day, he's still a young guy coming together in this boxing space. He has a lot of time to do a lot of great things in his career, right? But it looks like it's about that time, and it looks like he's super eager to bet on himself. He thinks he's ready right now. He still can get better. I'm sure he still will get better. But listen, man, he has a whole country behind him. Puerto Rico is in big support of Xander Zayas and what he brings to the table. We're talking about walking in the paths of a Tito Trinidad, right? in a Miguel Cotto, right? Those kind of fighters, that type of level of recognition. And he's looking like he's fitting right there and checking the boxes. So I'll be interested in seeing what Xander Zayas does next. Putting on a clinic last night, ultimately stopping Slauer Spomer. Great, huge victory, checking all the boxes. He seems to be aging well. We'll keep an eye on him. Excited to see what he does next. Going into our main event now, into the fight that everybody was waiting on, Keyshawn Davis versus Dennis Berinchyk. Man, guys, man, this fight was always going to be an interesting fight. Keyshawn Davis has been on this path of redemption ever since he was suspended at the end of 2023 for popping on a marijuana test. Actually had a no contest put on his record when he fought against Nahir Albright. He was able to bring it back and have a comeback year in 2024. Coming into this early first quarter of 2025, Keyshawn Davis getting this opportunity to fight Dennis Berinchyk, a recent WBO champion who got that championship beating an Emmanuel Navarrete, who came up from 130 pounds to challenge Dennis Berinchyk and became a champion. Keyshawn had an opportunity to finally take advantage of all that hard work. And listen, man, this fight took a life of its own, right? It's one thing for it to be a fight, but how much controversy between the 48 hours, between the press conference, between the media, between the media face-off down to the actual weigh-ins and that face-off that went crazy, all the controversy with watermelons and bananas and those things that got involved made this fight even more interesting and more spicy. And it seemed to have dialed in Keyshawn Davis even more, knowing that he had a lot of people or cells out there that wanted to cause divide in his team, that wanted to distract him, that wanted to get him off the path. And you know, I've always said that in my experience, whenever you're about to go and accomplish something great, don't be shocked if the devil doesn't choose to come and play in those moments, right? Take advantage and see if you could be focused and persevere through those moments. You know, in Keyshawn's last fight against Gustavo Lemos, he really dealt with Gustavo Lemos gaining a whole lot of weight and not making weight. His family, as far as his sisters and his mother, got into a bad accident. They could have not made it. You know, just dealing with all the distractions in his first hometown performance, packing out the stadium, a lot of pressure there, I'm sure, lights, cameras. But Keyshawn Davis is showing to prove that in those moments, those are his moments where he steps up the most, right? He embraces all of that attention. And this fight wasn't different. Keyshawn Davis comes out to the ring as a challenger, walks out there, walks into his destiny against Dennis Berinchyk, tunes out all of the noise, comes in with such a supportive team of Bomac as his trainer, Terrence Crawford sitting on the outside the ring, giving him instructions as well, support from the Shakur Stevensons of the world, support from his family. His mother's always there. His brothers were there. He just really has that. And that seems to be a common thread with a lot of these fighters. Even when you look at Floyd Mayweather and the support he had with his family, with his uncle Roger and his father and Floyd Mayweather Jr., and how he was able to stay grounded because of that. Keyshawn has all those intangibles in space as well. Going into the fight, you were thinking that Dennis Berinchyk was going to give Keyshawn Davis a big challenge, being that he came from that background, that Olympian background. He was a silver medalist in the Olympics on the same team as Vasily Lomachenko or Alexander Usyk or Alexander Vosnik. Those guys were all on the same team, and all those guys in their own respect had very successful professional careers. Dennis Berinchyk becoming a WBO champion seems like it was just a matter of time for that to happen, even though it ended up happening latter in the latter half of his life, being that Dennis Berinchyk is walking around about 35, 36 years old. He still was a show and proven undefeated Eastern European champion that was getting in the ring with Keyshawn Davis. And this was going to be Keyshawn Davis's opportunity to show and prove, to show that he was just levels above the rest of them and that he was only to be held in the conversation with the creme de la creme of fighters in the space. And listen, didn't sell short at all on that, right? Keyshawn didn't sell short on that. Dennis Berinchyk looking like he didn't even belong in the ring with him, coming in very awkward, real irky-jerky, jumping around, seemingly wanting to bait Keyshawn Davis into being offensive so he could be the counterpuncher and move around. But listen, the poise, the cerebral thought process of Keyshawn Davis prevailed as we've seen Keyshawn Davis take his time, slowly picking apart Dennis Berinchyk, attacking the body, walking Dennis Berinchyk into random left hooks, check left hooks, not throwing too many punches, very reserved with his punch output, but very accurate, dissecting and breaking Dennis Berinchyk up to the body. We saw Dennis Berinchyk actually go down early in this fight, but it wasn't counted as a knockdown. As it was counted as if he tripped or Keyshawn pushed him down. But when you looked at it, you can tell he did get hurt to the body. More importantly, Keyshawn noticed it, as well as his team, as well as his supporters, as far as Terrence Crawford, and he was instructed to go ahead and focus on that body. I saw that coming, kind of called it. I thought that Keyshawn would be breaking him to this body, because when you got these fighters like Dennis Berinchyk and these athletic fighters, even like a Vasily Lomachenko, or let's say even a Alexander Usyk, somebody who's moving around a lot, just kind of difficult. You can't go headhunting with those guys, because you're just going to end up chasing them around, trying to get these shots, and these guys can walk you into something. Now, Dennis Berinchyk has never shown any real significant punching power, but listen, on any given Sunday, timing beats speed, and timing sometimes shows up and looks like power, right? When you're able to time that out right and walk you into the right shot, anybody can be knocked down. This is boxing. So Keyshawn Davis had to take his time and really break down Dennis Berinchyk, and he did exactly that, breaking him down to his body, really timing as Dennis Berinchyk would take these opportunities to have these huge looping overhand right hooks that he would jump in with and try to kind of catch Keyshawn. And Keyshawn was able to time that, really get his head off that line, and able to react by hitting with a lot of left hooks right underneath the elbow, right on top of that liver, right on the right area of Dennis Berincyk's body over and over again, and ultimately hit him with a two-piece to the body in round 4 and put Dennis Berinchyk down there for good, right? It was easy work for Keyshawn Davis. And after you see a performance like that and you see him become a champion, and you see Keyshawn Davis and what he's done in the past 4 fights from the beginning of 2024 to this moment right now as a WBO champion, he's not only beat his opponents, he's shown that there's levels to this game. And of course, at 135 pounds, when you're looking at an exciting fighter, a must-see boxer like Keyshawn Davis, you can't help but bring up the obvious elephant in the room, Gervonta Tank Davis, right? Everybody wants to see what Gervonta Tank Davis is going to do on March 1st against Lamont Roach. And like I've said before in old videos, I'm more so looking forward to see what Gervonta Tank Davis, who he calls out at the end of the fight, than actually watching the fight with him and Lamont Roach. No offense to Lamont Roach, a great fighter in his own right, a great 130-pound champion, but most people just weren't really thinking or expecting to see him in the ring with Tank Davis, expecting Tank Davis, this being his last hoorah, this last run around at 135, telling everybody that he's really considering retiring. People really wanted to see Gervonta Tank Davis have those signature fights that were going to separate him from the rest of the space and put him in the conversations of the legends in the sport to make his legacy A1, right? And who are those fighters? The Shakur Stevensons, at one point the Devin Haney's, the Teofimo Lopez's, and now the Keyshawn Davis's, the Vasily Lomachenkos. These are the guys that they want to see Tank in the ring with. And me, I can't lie, I'm right there with him. I want to see Tank in the ring with these guys as well. But what will Tank do is going to be the question, right? As Tank has always been the guy to move to the beat of his own drum. His handlers seem to always have another plan for him than what his fans want to see, or what the fans of boxing want to see. I would say Tank Davis has a community of fans around him that don't really put pressure on him to fight certain fighters. They just want to see him fight, as you've heard many of them say many of times. But the fans of boxing have always pushed back and want to see Tank Davis in the ring with the best competition possible. Keyshawn Davis seems to check all those boxes. This is not Shakur Stevenson, who some people consider to be a boring boxer, or Devin Haney, or Vasily Lomachenko, who's past his prime in age, being in the 36, 37-year old bracket of fighters. This is a young, up-and-coming, really motivated, exciting, must-see boxer in Keyshawn Davis. You got to imagine that Davis versus Davis, and that's a coincidence with itself, right? Gervonta Tank Davis versus Keyshawn Davis. It's got to be one of the next biggest fights that can be made at 135 pounds. I mean, sure, Shakur Stevenson checked those boxes as well, but we know Shakur also has a fight coming up next week against Floyd Schofield Jr., coming off of a serious hand surgery. You look at the pictures of Shakur Stevenson right now. I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, you can take a look at it right here. You see how those hands look. You got to wonder, what is that going to look like for Shakur with Floyd Schofield, based on his performance with Schofield Jr. Well, let us know as to whether or not that's a worthwhile fight for us to see. And maybe even Tank is looking to see that performance to see if that's who he might want to fight next. But Keyshawn Davis checking all the boxes. In all actuality, I believe going into that fight, and this is going to be going against popular belief, I think Keyshawn Davis has a good chance of beating Tank Davis. I make that fight a 50-50 fight. think he's showing and proving that he can fight on many levels. He can fight on the inside. He can fight on the outside. He can take his time. He has the poise. He's not just going to be biting on feints and falling for traps very easily. And he has a great corner in Bomac, and he has great support and champions that he works with on a daily basis, in the Terrence Crawfords and the Shakur Stevensons, and even the Andre Ward from time to time showing up to advise and keep this kid grounded. And he shows that he has the ability to deal with all of the distractions, that he's been through enough in his life. You know, Keyshawn spoke on this a little bit and said, listen, he's grown up in a time in his life where he even considered unaliving himself, right? Dealing with the pressures and the adversities that, you know, this journey has given him to become that boxer, what he had to work through to stay focused and go compete overseas in Russia and these other places across Europe that he went to compete as an Olympian, and how it's built his character to who you see him to be today. So he's not going to be distracted very easily. Very experienced in his own right, just like Tank may be experienced. Yeah, I think that would be a very interesting fight. But let's see what Keyshawn does next. He came in at 135, didn't make the weight with any problem, but most people can see Keyshawn Davis competing at 140 as well. A lot of monkey business going on at 140 with Teofimo Lopez and his antics and the way he tries to bait and you know, build up this reputation for himself where people want to see him get punched in his mouth. Well, now that Keyshawn holds a WBO title at 135, maybe he decides to go ahead and challenge for Teofimo Lopez's WBO title at 140. Who knows? Maybe he just goes up to 140 and fights the like of an Isak Pitbull Cruz up there and give the fans a real exciting fight. Who knows what the future holds? You got to think that Keyshawn Davis has a lot of options, and it'll be interesting to see what route he takes. I think we're all waiting on February 22nd to see what Floyd Schofield and Shakur Stevenson look like in the ring. Not that they would fight Keyshawn Davis, but, well, not that Shakur would fight Keyshawn Davis, as they have this brotherly relationship where they refuse to fight each other. But I think it'll make a little bit of a difference possibly as to what Tank does on March 1st after his fight with Lamont Roach. A lot of people who are interested in seeing what's going to happen in the 135-pound weight class division have got to be anticipating the call out that Gervonta said and communicated that he would be doing on that night. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, great night of fights, a lot of showing and proving. I think the fights will age well as far as in where these fighters are going to be, how these fighters are going to be looked at in boxing. You got to think Keyshawn Davis has got to be one of the number one next up and coming stars right now to 135. Xander Zayas, I think, made a good argument to be considered one of those guys to be in his next fight being a real big fight at 154. You saw Abdullah Mason getting a lot of development, and you see him growing, showing, improving, continuing to move up that ladder to be must-see boxing at all time. And of course, you've seen the likes of a Vito Mielnicki make an argument for his presence in 160 being anticipated. There's a lot of things that came off of this card. I'm real excited to see what happens next. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Keyshawn Davis, Tank Davis, next. How do you feel about it? Xander Zayas, has he checked the boxers for you? Are you ready to see him make a big fight? Are you ready to see him challenge to go to the levels of challenging a Sebastian Fundora? Or does he need to slow down a little bit and still stay in his space and continue to develop? Abdullah Mason, is he checking the boxes for you as well? Let me know what you think in the comments. It's your boy Claymore Rain. Listen, once again, shout out to all my subscribers. You guys are the best, keeping this channel where it needs to be. Please continue to support. Love all the support you guys are giving us. If this is your first time tapping into content, I'm always inviting you guys. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys hit the like button as well so that this video gets in front of more people. And definitely subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you're getting alerts when its content is dropping. It's your boy Rain. It's that ATP Combat Media Show. And at this point, we out.